Hi, I'm Eileen Roche, and welcome to today's episode of Between Friends. Thank you for joining me. I'm delighted to have you here. And we are going to be talking all about machine applique on t-shirt knits, which is, a hot topic, a popular garment to wear for sure. I will live in knits, wear them almost every day. So I see many of you are piping in where you're watching from. We have Cindy in South Dakota, somebody in San Diego, and, just all over. And I know so many of you are big fans of my guest today. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring her right in. And that's Dawn Chace from Creative Appliques. Hi, Dawn.
Hi, Eileen. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We had the opportunity to meet in person for the first time just this year in November at the Houston Quilt Fest, which was super fun, right?
It was amazing.
Was that your first time?
It was my second time.
Second time. Yeah. Gets better every time, right?
It really does. It really does. It's on my calendar for this year too.
Mm-hmm. The first time is kind of overwhelming, I think, to anybody, whether you're an advanced quilter, embroiderer, sewist, it doesn't matter, just the show itself. But then you kind of really get a handle on what to look for and what to appreciate when you're there.
Yes, absolutely. I agree 100%.
Good. Well, we're going to talk, there's so much to discuss about applique, right? There's the fabrics that you would select. There's the stabilizer that you'd put on the knit fabric. There's pre-treating the fabric. And then, of course, the hooping process. So I think you and I will break it up into different segments today. But before we get started, I'll bet that many of our viewers would be interested in knowing a little bit more about you, Dawn, personally. So can we do that? Maybe you tell me when you got and how you got into machine embroidery?
So I come from a long history of stitchers. My father's mother, my grandmother, actually went to college in the 30s for fashion design.
Wow.
And she ended up teaching and being a home ec teacher. And so in the 30s, a woman going to college, that's
unheard of.
Crazy unheard of, exactly. Right. And so she taught home ec, so I learned a lot from her, but my mother also did a lot of sewing, and she would always make our Halloween costumes from scratch, Oscar the Grouch and Hawaiian, and I was also used to be a professional ballet dancer for 12 years. I spent 30 years dancing. Wow. And my mother, when I was growing up, she would sew a lot of our costumes with all the tulle and all of the binding and the sequins and all of that. And so I come from that history, and I always loved sewing. When I was 16 and I had a debutante ball, I made a gunny sack dress from scratch. And so sewing has always been in my blood and in my DNA, I guess you would say. Yeah. But I really got into machine embroidery in 2007. My dad had bought my mom an embroidery machine in 1995. And it never left the box. And in 2007, I had two little girls, a 3-month-old and a 3-year-old. And I was like, what am I going to do with my time? And I thought, I want to try out machine embroidery because my aunt was very much into it. Yeah. And every holiday, she would send us something that was embroidered. And I loved it. And I thought, I would really like to give this a try. So I asked my dad if I could have the machine because it sat there for 12 years. And I thought, it's, technology, it's not getting any newer or any better. And so he almost made me sign a contract to give me the machine. But when I finally got the machine and turned it on, I was hooked from the first stitch, or should I
Oh.
say hooped, because I just fell in love with it immediately. And that's where this whole road and journey started. And I've never looked back. I love it.
Wow, that's an amazing story. It really is. I love hearing the evolution of your skills, and then when you jumped into embroidery in 2007. That's really very cool. But, so when did you start the business? If you started embroidery in 2007, when did the business start?
So the business started when I started actually selling designs was in 2013, but when I started actually digitizing and playing with designs was more like 2010.
Okay.
So I also had like my own little Etsy shop where I sold birthday shirts and any kind of holiday stuff like that, applique shirts on knit. So I had all that experience from knowing what is a good quality design, what stitches well, what looks good. You can't just take any design and it automatically be something that's exceptional. And so I learned pretty quickly with all that experience of sewing personally for a business, what was high quality and what was good quality designs, and what went into that. And that's something that that comes from experience. I think it's not something that you could like really read in a book or can be taught.
Right, for sure. And it takes a long time to master those skills. It really
Yeah.
does. And even to understand a good embroidery design from a poor one,
Yes.
often when it's in the hoop, often looks really great. When it comes out of the hoop, maybe the results are diminishing a little bit. And then you wash it, a whole nother story. So it does take a long time.
Exactly.
Let's see. So you have a couple
Exactly.
comments. Like Linda Gifford says, she's surprised it still worked after sitting in the box for so long. Well, like you said, the technology doesn't get any better, right? As
Yep.
time marches on. It's not like a wine. It will work, but maybe it wouldn't have been able to read all the formats that were available at that, now, right? Because it
Exactly.
doesn't go backwards. It doesn't go backwards. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then Tracy Edwards says that she can't wait to meet Dawn on the Sew and Sale on Sew and Sale 15. So you're going on a cruise, I think, huh?
I am going on a cruise. Yes,
Isn't
in
that
May.
fun?
I'm
Yeah,
so
where are you going?
excited. We're going to Bermuda.
Okay,
We are going to
lovely.
Bermuda for 5 days, and I'm teaching, I think, 4 classes, all in the hoop projects from beginner to advanced.
And where do
So
you sail from?
we Cape Liberty, New Jersey. So I guess we leave the harbor going right by the Statue of Liberty. So I'm
Oh,
really excited
yeah.
about that, because I grew up in Pennsylvania, spent a lot of time in New York City with dancing, and
Sure.
have not gotten to see the Statue of Liberty. So I'm really
Oh,
excited about that.
oh, well, that's going to be quite memorable. It is really something to see. Okay, so let's get back to a little bit more. So why did you started your business? Why applique only?
So that's a very good question, because when I first started with embroidery, of course, you stitch all the embroidery designs, the designs that are in the machine, and then you find out you can download stuff from the internet and buy designs on the internet. And it was always embroidery. And when my daughter was 7, she wanted a monkey themed birthday party. And all of the monkeys I found, they were cute, but they were more, I don't know, zoo looking, not so kiddish. And I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of match the paper plates and all that. And so I thought, well, I found an applique, and I wasn't happy about it, because it scared me. To be honest, it really scared me. And I tried it, and I was amazed at how much I fell in love with it. And the fact that just taking the same design and by simply switching up the fabric and the thread, you can have a whole new look to the same design. And you can't always do that with a regular embroidery design.
That's right. That's right. And
Yeah.
speaking of changing it up, like, what's the most popular finish on your website, or maybe even of just your own liking? So would that be a run stitch, a open zigzag, or a satin, or maybe something else?
So I'm really partial to the satin. That's where I started. That's where the industry kind of was when I started digitizing. So it took a while to perfect that with the stitch width and the underlay and all of those things.
Sure.
And so I really fell in love with satin stitch. But as time has progressed, the industry has transitioned more towards, bean stitch and running stitch and the zigzag or the vintage stitch. So I like it all, but I think my hardcore preference is probably satin stitch.
Okay. Well, I like that you stay up with the trends and that you offer those options to your customers. I think that's a good business decision, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's a typical day like in your studio? I imagine, when you run your own business, it can be quite challenging. So, do you still get to stitch?
Yes, so I still do get to stitch, not as often as I would like to, because it does take a lot of time designing the files and then
Mhm.
converting them all to the different formats and zipping them all and then writing all the instructions, especially for in the hoop designs. That takes quite a while because
Right.
I'm always thinking through what someone's going to ask me to try to put that correctly in there. But a typical day, usually I walk into the studio at 7 in the morning and I'll walk out at 6 o'clock at night. And I'm pretty much in here the whole day, either test
Mhm.
stitching or designing or uploading files, managing the website, managing social media, all the things. So
It's a lot.
it's, it is a lot. It is a lot, but I love it. So
Yeah. It's a lot for sure. Okay. Well, let's see. Sharon here says that to me, the satin stitch looks more professional, but she does enjoy the faster stitch out of some of the other options. I agree. Sometimes, you know,
yeah,
that's what you want. And also, they're lighter weight. Bean stitch and a run stitch are lighter weight. So,
yes.
yeah.
And I think
Mhm.
it matters too what project you're putting it on. Like if you're putting it on a quilt, you might not want satin stitch.
Mhm.
If you're putting it on a knit shirt for a little kid, maybe the satin stitch is a little too much. So maybe the vintage stitch works better. So I think
Mhm.
sometimes it depends on the project you're working on as well.
Absolutely, for sure. I mean, that should definitely play into it. Something that's gonna, unravel, you're gonna wanna make sure you have good coverage on that outline of the fabric. So,
Yeah.
okay, well, eventually we're gonna get to talk about color, so I'll save that question for later. But here's a query. How many pairs of scissors do you have in your studio?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I probably have more than the average person because of the fact that I'm left-handed. So
Oh!
when I started out, I didn't know there were left-handed scissors, and it's
Mhm,
not just as simple as just switching around the blades. It's actually a
mhm.
whole new pair of scissors that is made for
Yes,
left-handed people.
that's right.
So, yeah, just sitting here looking at the little magnetic strip I have over there, which doesn't include all the ones that are in the drawer in the cutting table and the ones in the sewing desk here. There's just 20 over there
Okay.
on
So
on the
how
pegboard.
how about this? Do you have more scissors in your sewing room than knives in your kitchen?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Unless you're including butter knives. If you're including, like, full up,
Yeah.
knives
No,
that
like kitchen knives, yeah.
yeah,
Like the
that's, yes, I
right.
have more definitely
Mhm,
have more scissors than,
mhm.
knives.
And, okay, and another good comparison would be shoes. Well, that's an American thing, right? American women have a lot of shoes, so not everybody on the planet has a lot of shoes. So maybe we
Yes.
won't go there.
No.
Kind of embarrassing, actually. Let's see. How about how many machines do you have right now in your studio?
So currently in my studio, I have 4.
Okay.
So a
And are they
serger and go ahead.
okay?
So I have 1 serger and I have my luminaire here and I have a multi-needle and then I have my travel machine that I use for when I go every month to volunteer for sewing. So
Okay. I have the same setup at home. Same
yeah,
setup. The same 4. Mhm. A
yep,
multi-needle, a luminaire, and a, serger, which I love,
right,
and then the portable sewing machine.
yep.
Yeah. Sandy
If I
Martinez says, what is a lot of shoes? Well, Sandy, why don't you answer that for us? Right? I'm actually not that guilty about the shoes. I used to be, but now I pretty much just wear flats. But there was a time when I probably had more shoes than scissors, and I got a lot of scissors, right? Okay, so let's see. So when havoc occurs in the hoop, and it does for all of us,
Yes.
what's your initial response? What do you do?
Well, I usually get out my my stitch ripper from Dime
Okay.
and start ripping it out. It depends on if it's something that can't be salvaged, then, you know, that gets thrown away. Hopefully it's not a very expensive item I'm stitching on.
Yeah.
And I can, you know, salvage it by ripping out the stitches. If I can't rip out the stitches, then you're most likely going to get an applique frame on top of that.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great way to resurrect a project that's not turning out as planned, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So look at Cindy Coleman here. She says applique scares her, that she's been doing embroidery for 2 years and still can't quite push herself to do applique. And we'd love to know applique scissor recommendations. Well, scissors are part of it, but really applique is pretty friendly, isn't it, Dawn?
It really is. And, you know, with machine embroidery as a whole, there's a learning curve, right? You know,
Yeah.
depending on what you're stitching on, you need to have the correct stabilizer, the correct hoop. All of
Mhm.
those things come into play.
Mhm.
And it also comes into play with applique as well. So the factor with applique is just learning what type of medium you're going to put on it.
Mhm.
You know, what kind of fabric choice you're going to put on the item you're stitching, and then having the correct preparation of that medium. And then those two things together will help you with getting the correct results that you want. But if you start with the correct stabilizer and the correct hoop for the item you're stitching on, applique is just literally what it is. You're applying something on top of that. And so with that, you are adding one extra little factor, but it's not as overwhelming as it looks. And if you told me 20 years ago I'd be running a business and it would be called Creative Appliques, and the main thing that I would have been digitizing is applique designs using fabric, I would have told you you're not right in the head, because I was just not that. Applique scared me too.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
well, Anna Silwell says that she loves applique, especially on T-shirts, and that's because it's lighter weight. Applique is lighter weight than regular embroidery.
Mhm.
Truly, it's harder to stabilize for regular embroidery than it is for applique because you're adding so much, so many stitches. So,
Yep.
you know, eh, you're already almost an expert if you've been embroidering successfully with traditional complex fill and satin stitches. So, you know, don't fret that applique for sure. Aretha Ranke
Yes.
says that she loves applique because it hardly puckers at all. I mean, and it's true, and we're going to go through how to pre-treat your fabric and stabilizer recommendations and so forth. And they're not that complicated, these recommendations. And if you do that, it's all going to come out really flawless for sure.
It will.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah. And then,
Absolutely.
okay, we have a couple of things. Remember, I asked you, what is your initial, what havoc occurs? What do you do, right? What's your initial response? And Chris says, I always say, stop, 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 stop. Yeah, I talk to my machine like that too. And then somebody else had a pretty good line. Claire says, I sigh and yell, seriously? Well, that's pretty tame, Claire. So yeah, you can say that anywhere. You can say that in a public place. You could say it at home. Doesn't matter, right?
Yep.
Oh
Yes.
boy. And but you know, sometimes you just have to walk away and exhale, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's see. What else do we have here? Oh, Ellen Buck says that on towels of most kinds with a bad stitch issue, she cuts the bottom of the towel off, adds a decorative fabric, and stitch just above the fabric. And voila, it's a wonderful fix. That is a very good fix. I like that.
Love that.
Okay, so how often do you clean your machines, Dawn?
Well, I take them in yearly for service. The ones
Okay.
that I can take in, my multi-needle is just a regular daily maintenance thing when with
Mhm.
use. and hopefully it never needs service. But with my other machine, my two brother machines that I have, I take them in yearly for maintenance, but I clean the insides after, just about every project, not necessarily after stitching every embroidery thing, but especially when I'm doing any kind of sewing, quilting, stitching with Minky, things like that. I will definitely clean it after those projects. Yeah.
Right. This weekend, I was working on a personal project. I'm piecing a quilt, and it's a queen size quilt, so it's a lot of blocks, like 180. What was I
Oh
thinking?
my
But anyway,
goodness.
it's going to be
Wow.
beautiful, and I have lots of time to. I mean, I have several months. The weddings in June. So, but using cotton thread, well, that stuff lints all over. I am so spoiled with the polyester embroidery thread, and I use our Exquisite brand. It never lints ever. I mean, my machines are spotless, and I embroider a lot. But when you are sewing with that cotton thread,
yes, it makes quite a mess.
Really does make a mess, for sure.
Yeah.
Really does make a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Retha Ranke wants to know what's your go-to needle size. Well, I don't know that that's such a thing, but maybe it is. Go ahead. What's your go-to needle size?
7511.
7511. Oh, she likes a nice tight needle, right?
Yeah, that comes from years of stitching on knits, I tell you. And now sometimes I forget to change it out. I forget to oh, I'm working on vinyl, or I'm, working on a stretch. I need to change that needle. So.
Okay, cool. So let's see. Linda Brooks, well, this is what her response is. Oh, sugar. Oh, man. Oh, really? And if all else, just scream when something goes wrong in the hoop, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. We've all been there. We have all been there. Okay, let's see. Well, I was going to ask you, how often do you have your machines overhauled? But you do that annually. I'm very proud of you that you do that. That's impressive that you stick to that schedule.
Yes. Well, my local store sends me a postcard every year and says, "Happy birthday to your machine. Bring it in for service." So it's nice that they remind me.
That's brilliant. Well, why don't you give a shout out to your dealer? Who's your dealer?
It's Tidewater Sew and Vac here
Nice.
in southeastern Virginia. I think there's like 7 different locations. So yeah.
And are you in Hampton Roads? Where are you?
Yes.
Hampton Roads. Okay. So my daughter lives across the bay, the channel there in Norfolk. And I know you know that, but everybody else doesn't know it. So kind of we're family, you and I, Dawn. Kind of. We haven't actually met in Virginia, but we could.
Yeah, well, I heard you're coming to, you're going to be here towards the end of February. That's when the Mancuso Mid-Atlantic Quilt Festival is happening.
Oh, that's going to be fabulous. I'm actually not going to be there in February. I'm going to be there in April. But
so I thought you said you were going to be here.
Well, things change all the time,
Okay.
My daughter is a doctor and a resident. So, when I go, I'm often going to help her out because she has nights. She works nights sometimes, and schedules change quickly. So, tell me about the Mancuso at the Mid-Atlantic. I was there. I'm not going to tell you how many years ago because I think it was 30. Oh, I can't believe it. But so where will it be this year? In Williamsburg?
No, it's always at the same place. It's at the Hampton Coliseum.
Oh,
well, it's actually the Hampton Convention Center, which is next to the Coliseum, but it's pretty much the Coliseum.
Oh, that'll be great. Well, the Mancuso brothers, are originally from Pennsylvania. I lived there. I know you lived in Pennsylvania, and I haven't had the opportunity to run into them personally, but I do remember when they used to do the Pennsylvania out in Lancaster, that show, and it was fabulous. And so it was an awful lot of fun. For sure. Yeah. Okay, we're working here. We can't just chit-chat and gossip all day long. So, well, Dawn, let's really talk about the topic at hand. And that is all about, applique. And one of our favorite things to talk about, we already mentioned, was thread. And today's program is brought to us by one of our products, and that is our 40-weight 24-pack of exquisite thread. So you're going to get 24 gorgeous colors, all collated for spring. And, you know I can't wait. And spring in Virginia is beautiful, right, Dawn?
It really is. It really
Yeah.
is.
So let's
Yes.
go ahead and take a look at the overhead cam here. I have the actual spools. So this is the box that it comes in, not with the butterflies, but aren't they pretty? All of these colors on these butterflies are in the collection. And
Gorgeous.
these butterflies are from I think it's the Majestic Butterfly Collection, but they're just so pretty and freestanding, right? We just stitch them a water soluble stabilizer. But look at those colors. And let's take a look at a close-up look at that. We have a little video of the colors.
Look at that.
Don't you just
Just
love the
gorgeous.
colors, huh, Dawn? They have some blue and yellow, and look at the lilacs and purples. I know Virginia is full of azaleas and rhododendrons. And what other favorite flowers do you have up there?
Irises and hydrangeas, and hydrangeas in the purple or the pink, or
Yeah.
even like the blue, and then daffodils with the
Right.
yellows. Oh, so gorgeous.
I know. And this collection, this palette of 24 colors, you're going to have a light, a medium, and a dark tone of all those different colorways. So you really can add, dimension and depth to your embroidery designs with this 24 pack. I love it. It's really one of my favorite collections, right? I love these
Yes.
collections because it takes the work away. You just stick with this 24 spool box, and you're going to breathe spring into whatever you stitch.
Gorgeous.
Yeah. Okay, Dawn. So now that we're talking color, let's go ahead and talk about fabric selection for the applique itself. Now, eventually we're going to get to putting it on a knit fabric, but first we're going to start with applique. So take it away.
Okay. So, one of the things that I love about applique, and I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, was about how I love the fact that you can take the same design and you can simply switch it up by changing the fabric. And so let's look here at some examples that I have. So this little snail here this is the same design, but by simply switching up the applique fabric that we used, you get a whole new look. You can have a little boy, you can have a little girl, you could take that gorgeous collection, the spring collection of the exquisite thread, and you could make a panel for a quilt block of 10, 12, 15 different colors of the snail and match it to your fabric and have a gorgeous quilt top or a wall hanging. So some of the fabrics that we like to use for applique is basically some cotton quilting fabric. Now this fabric is the same stuff that you use for quilts. It's 100% cotton, and this is the stuff that we like to use mainly for applique designs because you have so many choices, so many different colors, so many different patterns, so many different ways of seeing tone on tone and then contrast. And it's just so much fun to be able to take a design. This is all the same circle, same size, but you can see how it all looks different by simply changing up the fabric. Now, yes, the stitch type on the outside is different here on each of them, but it's still the same circle, and you can see how it all looks very different. And so that's one of the things that I really love about applique and using the applique fabrics or the cotton fabrics in applique, because of being able to just change up things so quickly and so easily simply by changing up the fabric and the color choices. Now, usually when I start with an applique design, I will choose my fabric first, because that is what usually I'm most drawn to, is the fabric. And then I will match my threads to the actual fabrics that I have chosen. But you can also do it in reverse. If you have a project or a theme or a color of thread that you absolutely love and you want to use that thread, you can then take the thread and match that to some fabric. So it works in reverse as well. So I have to say, most of the time I use the cotton quilting fabric, but we also use some things like, what if you want to add some shimmer or some shine to your applique? Well, the thing about that, it's kind of hard to do that with cotton quilting fabric. I mean, there's not a lot of shimmer and shine with that. But what you can add is HTV or heat transfer vinyl. Now this is Caesar HTV, which Dime carries. They carry sheets of it, they carry packs of it, but I just love that I can take some HTV, which is heat transfer vinyl, and I can make an applique design right with just using some vinyl. Now you can't see here on the lights, but this green here is called Aurora, and it's got such a lovely opalescent shine to it. It's absolutely amazing. And then the black here is what's called Strip Flock. And this is kind of like a velvet feel to it. So this makes awesome if you have a teddy bear that you want to stitch for a little kid and they love to touch things, they're very tactile. Using some strip flock with the teddy bear, oh, that is so perfect. What if you also want to have some bling, some glitz, right? Well, you can use some glitter HTV as well. So this is my non-traditional Christmas shirt, but I used the glitter HTV that Dime carries, and I just love that I can have this sparkle and this bling, and it works exactly like an applique design. Now here I just used an actual applique with satin stitching, and I have no issues with the HTV or the heat transfer vinyl pulling away. So with the heat transfer vinyl, you're obviously going to follow the instructions that come on the package, but these get ironed on to the item, and voila, it's adhered to the item. And there's no issues with it coming off or anything like that. But if you have regular cotton quilting fabric, how are you going to treat that? How are you going to attach that fabric to the item you're stitching on? Okay, so we have this product that is called Fuse Me, and we're going to talk about Fuse Me because what it essentially is it comes on a roll, and it's literally glue on a roll. Now, I know that sounds funny, but what it actually is, it's kind of a mesh, but when you use it with your iron, it is an adhesive, and we'll show you how to attach it in a few minutes. But this is what we use on the back of the cotton quilting fabric to adhere it to the knit. So here I have a piece of knit here that I took into my machine, and I stitched some of these ovals here. Now, the one on the left here, the pink one, has no Fuse Me on it whatsoever. It's just a regular piece of the cotton quilting fabric, just like this, nothing treated on it, just took it from the piece of fabric, cut a small swatch of it, and stitched it on here. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but it's really gappy, and I ironed this with steam, and I put starch on it. So it has been pressed very well, but you can still see the line here of where it was folded, and you can still see the fabric moving, right? And when you put this, what do you think is going to happen when you put this in a washer machine? This is going to just get all puckery, and it's going to get all ripply. That's not, unless that's the way you want it to be, then I don't think that that's the best way to use the fabric. So what we like to do is treat the back of the cotton quilting fabric with Fuse Me. And essentially what we do is we iron it on to the knit itself, and by doing that, it adheres it, and it prevents fraying of the material. It prevents shrinking of the material, puckering, and also pulling away. So if you can see, if I can get this, you can see how flat this is here, right? There's no movement of the actual cotton quilting fabric on the knit, right? And this one has so much movement, so much going on here. So
So
now we have
Dawn,
two, yeah.
yeah, so we have a question. Susan Bizanzo says, does the fuse me take place of a product like heat and bond? And I would say yes, right? It's a softer feel than
Yes.
heat and bond.
Yes, it absolutely does take the place of heat and bond. And I actually like it better because, as Eileen said, it's thinner, it's not as thick, and it allows for the fabric to be more movable, more pliable, but it also is it adheres it glues it to the knit. So
Very
I
quickly.
prefer it better.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. And one of the things about heat and bond is if you fuse it to fabric and then you stitch, and let's say you had a little issue, well, the holes, the penetrated holes from the needle will not disappear with heat and bond because
Right.
it's a permanent hole. So, you know, just in case that can happen. And I'm just going to
Yes.
jump back because I know we're going to go on to how to apply this, but Kathleen Hammond wants to know, is the HTV soft enough for children's PJs?
Absolutely. Yes. Depending on the ones you want, but like the glitter HTV, there's not any glitter that comes off of it. It's, you know, there may be a little bit on the clear transfer sheet when you first pull that transfer sheet off, but it is so the glitter is all part of the solid vinyl. It's not messy, but yes, it's very flexible, and yeah, I mean it's, you know, it's very
And
malleable and
yeah. Mhm. Right. And so Mega Ladybird wants to know, can you use Fuse Me on towels? Well, sure. You could use Fuse Me on any material, really. I
yeah.
haven't had any issues with that. And where can Kathy Moriarty wants to know where you can find it. Dime sells it. It's on our website, DZGNS, so you can watch it there. And let's see. And is the Fuse R. Mary wants to know, is Fuse Me adhesive on both sides? Of course it is. So first you're going to fuse it to the applique fabric. And Dawn's going to do that in a moment. And then after applying it to the base fabric, you'll fuse it again, and then it melds those two layers together, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. And I think we're all caught up. One of our team members put the link for Fuse Me into our chat, so you can find that there. Okay, Dawn, carry on.
All right.
You're doing a great
Thank you.
job. And you know, you're taking such a deep dive that any of our embroidery friends that are watching, if you have other embroidery friends that would like to know more about machine applique, please invite them, send them the link over right now, because the more the merrier.
Absolutely. And I just kind of want to dispel the fear and the unknown of applique. So that's one of the things that, you know, I like to give as much information to help people understand that it's not so daunting and not so phenomenal that you can't do it, right? And so there's one other point I wanted to make about the Fuse Me as well, is this brown one here. So these I just finished in a running stitch, okay? So nothing special, just did a running stitch around them. That's it to adhere them. But one of the things that can happen when you use the satin stitch or any kind of dense stitching around it is you can get fraying, and you can get parts of the design or parts of the fabric start pulling away. So I don't know if you can see that right there, but it's the fabric itself is starting to fray and it's starting to pull away. And, you know, hopefully you have a nice quality of cotton quilting fabric, but even with some of the nice thicker quality, you can still get it to fray. And over time, this is just going to keep separating more and more and more away from the satin stitching. So that's something to be aware of. So with the Fuse Me, here, this is ironed down completely. It's all fused to the knit, and there's no fraying that's going to happen here because it has completely adhered and it's nicely fused on there.
That's a beautiful sample, Dawn. You know, I'd like to make a point about that brown fabric. Now, that's just a solid brown, but digitally printed fabrics, and there are so many that we use today, have that problem too. So maybe the fabric is not tearing away from the satin, but the dye does, believe it or
Yeah.
not. And you'll see a white kind of inner line along that satin, and that's because it's a digitally printed fabric, which we love. And there's lots of reasons to use them for other projects, but maybe not so much for applique, right? Without using Fuse Me to make sure it's permanently attached.
Yes, that is a great point. A great point about the digital prints, because it's a print that's just on top. It's not embedded within the fibers of the
Right.
item.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, you know, before you move on, since we're talking about fabrics, let's go ahead and take a look at scale of prints. All of your fabrics that you have these tiny little prints that are just adorable. But here is, you know, VA, right? To do on a big t-shirt for Virginia. And, you know, this scale is too big. I think these flowers, they looks a little awkward. The stripe is the right scale, but these big flowers, not so much. So, you know, on this uh, example, we have two different size scales. We have this medium size paisley, which fills these columns, you know, the applique area very nicely. And then, of course, any tone on tone that's almost miniature is going to be gorgeous in an applique, right? And I noticed lots of your fabrics look like that, right, Dawn?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm. Okay, back to you.
All right. So now the next thing we want to talk about is adhering it. So remember we said that it's essentially like glue on a roll with paper on the one side. So I wanted to show you an example here. This blue one here is not treated with anything. It's just the cotton quilting fabric. This blue one here, you can see the shininess on the back side there a little bit. This one has been treated with the Fuse Me. And if you can see the structure of it, adds some body and it adds some structure to the fabric. So that also will help with not fraying and not pulling away. And it gives it a nice, firmer, solid piece of fabric. So what we want to do, how do we want to treat it? So essentially we take our piece of cotton fabric and I like to place it face down. Okay, and I take my cut piece of Fuse Me and I put it on the back here. Now, if you can see, I like to cut just about a quarter or an eighth of an inch shy of the perimeter of the fabric. And that way I can ensure that it's not going to get stuck on my iron, stuck on my mat, and all of those things. So I have the fabric right side down, wrong side up, and I have the Fuse Me with the glue side on the wrong side of the fabric with the paper up. Now I'm going to turn it over. We don't want to iron on the paper. We want to iron on the fabric. And we just press really gently. You don't need a lot of pressure. It's the heat that's adhering it. We just need a little bit, and I'm not going back and forth like this. I'm just lifting and pressing to adhere it. And then you want to let it cool for a few seconds, but I'm impatient, so I like to just pick it up by the edge and then I wave it around to cool it off. And I take the paper and I remove it. And it is just that simple, that fast, that easy. And now it's all prepped and ready to go to apply to my embroidery project, my applique project. So now I want to talk about how do we do an applique project? How do we, what are the steps of the project? How do we get it on here? How do we adhere it? So what we essentially do.
Dawn, before you start, Cindy Coleman asked, do you pre-wash the cotton fabric?
So this is kind of a hot topic. It depends. And I have to put that in there because if you're stitching for a business and you're creating birthday shirts or something like that for a business, there are people that if you send them a shirt that has pre-washed fabric or pre-washed anything on it, it could potentially be considered used.
Right.
So if you're doing it for personal use and if you're doing it for friends or family, something like that, go ahead, by all means, pre-wash it. But if you're doing it for a business, I'd caution that you want to make sure, because of the fact of fabric detergents, allergies, those types of things. So the other thing is too, I like to have the sizing that comes in with, that when you buy the cotton fabric, I like the sizing of it to nice structure, and it's not, all, it's the longitude, the grain is even and correct, and I like it like that. So what I'll do is, I'll wash the shirts on delicate and I'll hang to dry.
Okay, fair enough. Now, John Seastone wants to know, does Fuse Me gum up the needle?
No, I've never had any gumming of the needle. It's not gummy. It's not. It's not, when you touch it, it's not sticky. This is not sticky to the touch at all. The way it gets activated is by the heat from the iron.
Right. And then
so there's nothing for it to stick to.
Yeah, Christy Gray wants to know, does it help make the fabrics less see-through, less, transparent for items? She uses a product called SF101, could eliminate the need for that. It does add a little layer of, I don't know. If it's a white, I don't know how to answer that. Do you, Dawn?
Yeah, it's not adding any kind of color to it. So it's not adding, it's adding a glue and an adhesive, which actually when it is on the item is clear.
Yeah.
So it's not going to, if you're trying to put, a white on top of red or on top of black, you're still going to see through it. So it's not going to have that same effect.
Right. Yeah. So, and then in that instance, I would probably treat it with an interfacing. Like we have a tricot knit interfacing, and that is a white fabric, and interfacing and fusible. So I would fuse that to the back of my applique fabric and then apply the Fuse Me, because I still want to make sure that it's going to fuse to the base fabric. That's what's really important there. So, okay.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So what I did here is I did a bunch of separate steps that, if you're in an applique design, these are all going to be right on top of each other. They're not going to be essentially blown apart like this is, but I did this on purpose so you can see, and I stitched it in black, which I would normally not stitch in black, but it's easier for you to see on the camera. So with this little snail, we're talking about this snail right here. The first step that's going to stitch is the placement line or the placement guide, okay? And it's a simple running stitch, and it shows you exactly where to place the fabric. And then what you would do is you would take your fabric that's already pre-treated with the Fuse Me and put it on top of the stitching, covering all the stitching. The point is not to see any of the stitching. You want to make sure that all of it is covered. And then that way, the next step you do is you stitch the tack down stitch. This is going to tack the fabric down onto the item. And then this is when I would trim. So I'd come in here with my scissors and I would trim really closely to all the way around the stitching like this.
Look how smooth she does that, Dawn. That is awesome. I like how you lift the applique to kind of get it to stand up so you can get those scissors so nice and close to the stitch line without snipping it. Boy, you're really good at that.
Yes, I like trimming in the hoop. This is one of the things I just, because it's so much fun and so gratifying to me. I know a lot of people don't like this step. They don't enjoy doing it. But for me, I can do it quicker than, if I'm doing a onesie or twosie, of them, I trimming in the hoop is fast for me. If I'm doing, 10 or 20, I might do some pre-cuts. So
Sure.
I trim, and then the next thing I do is I get my lint roller and I make sure I have all the little pieces out of the way, because then the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to now iron this. I'm going to press it down to activate the Fuse Me on the back side of the fabric, but now it's going to be completely ironed on down to the item. Okay, so that way now it's already adhered. So then the next step I'm going to do is now we have the shell. So now we'll stitch the placement line for the shell right there. And then we take our pre-treated fabric here, we place it on top, covering all the stitches. And now the next step is we're going to stitch the tack down. And now that once the tack down is stitched, we're going to trim it again. And once this is trimmed, we're going to use the lint roller. Now, why am I doing the lint roller? Because sometimes when you're trimming, you might get little threads, little pieces of threads like this right here that just came off, right? If you go ahead and try to get a little bit closer, and if that has any of the Fuse Me on it, you're going to put the iron on that, and it's either going to stick to the bottom of your iron or it's going to stick onto this, and you don't want that. You want to make sure you have all those little pieces out of the way. And now we iron that down. And then for this design, we've attached all of the pieces of fabric, and the following steps then would be just changing the thread colors and stitching out the decorative portions of the design. So one thing I do want to note is when I do placement and tack downs for all of my fabrics, I usually use white, regardless of what color the fabric is, because especially if it's being covered by a satin stitch, I will use white because it's not going to be seen. Okay. So that's how you do an applique that's trimmed in the hoop. So now, if you want, there are ways of doing pre-cuts, and I did these pre-cuts here, and essentially you would take the pieces. So first you would stitch out your placement line, stitch out the placement line for the body, and then stitch out the placement line for the shell. And then since these are already pre-cut and they have the Fuse Me on the back already, so I did the Fuse Me on the back and then I pre-cut these. Now I'll place them down. And this is definitely when you want to press and not iron. Iron is moving the item back and forth, with a sliding motion. This you definitely want to make sure you have it exactly where it needs to be. See, this is why I trim in the hoop, because I'm so much faster at it.
Well, Sandy Arp wants to know, what iron are you using?
This is just a little Cricut mini press. That's all.
It's just a little Cricut, mini press. So, but little irons, depending on the size of your hoop, you could use a full iron too.
Yeah, it's just a Cricut mini press.
Now Jeannie says. So I just want to kind of help Jeannie out here. She says, "What is the paper under the snail? Is the foundation?" She's new to embroidery. So Jeannie. Dawn is just teaching the process of machine applique. And normally she would be putting this snail on a garment, right? Like a t-shirt, right, Dawn? But
yes.
For presentation's sake, it's easier to do it on a flat piece of fabric. So she's using white fabric. But here it is, on a finished t-shirt, which is adorable. So that's the process. And the white fabric, the t-shirt, or if it's a fabric square. That's your base fabric, or it's also can be referred to as the host fabric. And that means the applique fabric sits on top of the base or the host fabric. So that's what those terms mean.
Yes. All right. And so that's, a way to, if you want to have your fabric pre-cut, then you can then just stitch the placement lines, put the fabrics down in each step, iron them down, and then you can skip the tack down stitching and move right on to the satin stitching or the other decorative stitching that may be blanket stitch, zigzag stitch, so forth.
Right. So Diane O'Donnell wants to know, are all of your designs digitized so that the applique is placed first and then all the satin is done later? Or, walk us through that process. What can they expect in your designs?
So I can't say 100% of the time, but the majority, I would say 99.9% of the time. The only reason it would not be sequenced that way is if you needed to have the satin stitching done on a portion of it before the next piece of fabric is done. But for me, when I digitize, two things are vital. It's sequencing of the design so that it stitches most efficiently and quickly, and also so it stitches fast. So in that sense, it means like there's not a lot of jumping around of the machine, not a lot of tying off. If I can go ahead and connect something with another part, I will do that. But yes, more times, most of the designs, all of the placement line, and then the tack down stitching are all done first, and then the satin stitching will be done at the end of the design. And that will change if it's a zigzag stitch or if it's a different stitch. But for satin stitching, all of the applique will be placed first and then the satin stitching.
Awesome. That's great. So Maureen Jackie wants to know, will we be showing techniques for hooping knits on today's demonstration? And we sure will. So stay tuned. That's coming up. Okay, Dawn, what else do you have?
I think that covers all of what I had as far as trimming in the hoop and the fuse me. And so I think next we're on to stabilizers.
Yes. And well, that's a really important topic. Right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So on knits, I like to use no-show cutaway stabilizer. How about you, Dawn?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So the idea is to stop the knit from stretching during the embroidery process. So you want to apply a cutaway to that knit fabric that is fused together with the knit. And then that way, when you're in the hoop, you can't stretch that portion of the t-shirt. The rest of it will continue to stretch, but not the hooped area. And that's important because, you don't want the needle to be able to push out the knit when it's hooped, right? We want it to just stitch right over that flat surface like it's cotton fabric.
Yes. I think it's also important to have the fusible no-show mesh on the back too, is when so that it's already adhered to the back of the knit, that when you go ahead and hoop it and you're trying to get that drum tight feel for the knit that you're stitching on, and you may go ahead and pull it to try to get rid of any of that rippling or any of the movement of the shirt. If you have it fused to that no show on the back, it's going to prevent you from distorting those fibers.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Now, Susan said she was trying to trim on a sweatshirt and it doesn't lay as flat when you're stitching only one layer. So she was wondering if it would help to lay the hoop with the item on the dime hooping station. Well, it most certainly helps to remove the hoop, any hoop, from the machine bed and place the hoop on a flat surface. Do not put it on your lap. Please don't hold it in your hand. Lay the hoop in a flat surface, just like you did when you were showing how to trim the applique. You should never hold that hoop in your hand, and because you will dislodge the fabric, and you're going to get the highest level of fabric if it's on a flat surface. So, and that's kind of what you're trying to do, right? So let me see, just see, there's, let's take a look at that actual stabilizer. I have a roll of it here so that you can see. So it's a cutaway, but it has some transparency to it. It's has a fusible, I don't know, you probably can't see it, but it has a sheen on this side, and that's the glue side. And then the side without any sheen, does not have glue. So it's the glue side that we put to the wrong side of the t-shirt, the garment that we're actually going to stitch. And we want to make sure we use a piece that's big enough to fill the hoop, right? So here's a little child's t-shirt. And let me turn this inside out because I've already applied that cutaway to it. And you can see I'm going to stitch that snail, which is, going to fit in a 4x4 hoop. And my stabilizer is much larger than that design. Don't worry about it. That's exactly what you want. You really want to fill that hoop with stabilizer. So I've, have a really generous piece here. So let's talk about placement, because that's really important too. So here I have a onesie. I have the center at the neckline marked with a straight pin. And I found, the center by just folding the garment in half, matching the shoulder seams. And boy, they're tiny, right? Those little onesies. Now, if you are decorating a onesie for a new baby, don't purchase anything smaller than 9 months or 12 months. First off, they are out of these little garments. The 0 to 3 months, they may wear once, right? So just make it easier on yourself and go for a bigger size. We have a placement kit that's quite handy for children if you are so inclined to use a placement kit. And it's by size, and it designates the location of the embroidery design so that it's leaves some space for the baby's chin. A lot of them have double rolls and so forth. And so then you would just stick a Target sticker right in there. But what if you have, a template of your design? Well, here's a fun way to work that together so you get the placement in the exact location that you want. So I'm taking my print and stick Target template paper. Now remember, this is sticky on one side, and I'm lining it up with my template, and then I'm taking that template and aligning that with the neckline right here. And then I'm just going to smooth that in place. And now I have my placement all set. I know exactly where I need to stitch. So now we're going to hoop. And this is already stabilized. Okay. So I'm using my totally tubular hooping station, which is so handy for this process, because, this is a board where it is cantilevered, right? There's a post underneath. I guess I can turn this on its side. It's always risky to do that. Let's see, so that you can see. So see, we have the post here, a big board and a smaller board, and with a hoop mat on top. So I'm going to take my hoop, the bottom frame, and I'm placing it on the board. And then I'm going to take my little onesie and I'm going to dress the board. Now, remember, it's not all going to stretch, right? Just the part that doesn't have stabilizer is going to stretch. And now I am going to pull this over because, my design area is not really in the center of the board. So I got to kind of pull this sleeve over a little bit to get somewhat centered. And I can feel that frame inside. And we'll just smooth that out. And then I take that top frame, and then I'm just going to drop that right in place. And boy, I'm pretty square. That is pretty good. So I got a big ripple right here. No harm. I can just lift that top frame a little bit and pull that out. And because, I have that stabilizer on the design area, I don't have to worry about fiber distortion. I'm not going to hurt it. Now, how do I get this on my single needle machine? Well, the first thing we're going to do, I forgot an important step. And that is to take our hoop guard and place that here. And I'm going to put that on the top frame. And we're going to have to kind of start from scratch. I knew I should have had that set up. Okay. Let's get that smoothed in place again. And now we'll place that frame in position as best we can. There we go. And we got it nice and snug. And now we're going to undress the board. So I'm going to pull the whole hoop off the board, and then I'm going to take a moment and turn those little sleeves inside out. And that's important to do that because those sleeves really want to get caught underneath the hoop. And now when I take this over to the machine and attach it to the machine, I have that whole design area open. My hoop guard keeps it open, and I can just kind of fold that back. And of course, I'll stay with the machine. But as I slide this onto the machine, I'll flatten it out because the foot is going to travel right here. And then once it clears the foot and I have this attached to the pantograph, then I'll go behind the foot and just open that up and center my needle over the template and just remove that template, and then I'm ready to stitch. So super easy on a onesie in a snap hoop monster. But maybe you'd like to use a sticky hoop. So we can do the same kind of thing with a sticky hoop. Now I can use PAL. I could have used PAL on the other one too, but now we'll just go ahead and we'll get our hoop aligned with the crosshair. And then I'm going to take that little t-shirt that we marked earlier and dress the board. And now I'll just line up that target sticker right there. I want to make sure that my target sticker is perfectly aligned, smooth it down. Now this stabilizer that I'm using is adhesive sew and wash, but I already have my no-show cutaway fused to the inside of the t-shirt. So it's a layer of stabilizer here, it's the t-shirt, and then we have that sticky adhesive sew and wash. And that allows me to not worry about really hooping, and yet I have the proper stabilization for a knit t-shirt. And then I'll just take my time to get this all kind of nested open and above the hoop. Let's turn that off, move that out of the way. And then when I take it over to the machine, I just have to kind of babysit it. I could, use some clamps if I want or what have you. But, these designs aren't real large. They're probably not going to fill the entire hoop. So that's plenty of space to stitch that design. Okay. It's easy to hoop, isn't it?
It is. It really is. And with the hoop guard, it makes it so much better.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see, what cutaway stabilizer is recommended for embroidering on a baby onesie, and what do you use to cover the back of the embroidery? Okay, so for the baby onesie, again, I'm going to use that no-show cutaway. Same product that I use on the children's t-shirts, adult t-shirts. It's just a knit. Doesn't matter what size or garment it is. So the no-show cutaway, I'm going to fuse to the garment. And then I'm going to, after the embroidery is complete, I'll take it out of the hoop, and then I press the t-shirt from the wrong side. And when I do that, that will reactivate the adhesive on the no-show mesh, and I can easily peel it away from the knit. And then I trim around the design, get rid of all that excess, leave about a 1/4 inch around the design. Pinking shears are a great tool to use for that, right, Dawn? Do you use that?
Yes.
Yeah, and then I use our product, and goodness, I wish somebody in my chat would help me out. I can't remember the name of it. Fuse and Stitch, maybe. Fuse So Soft is the name of our tricot knit interfacing, and that's going to cover the bobbin work on the inside of the garment. And I'll really only do that for children. I don't do it for myself because it doesn't bother me. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Dawn, it was so much fun getting to know you and having you here. You shared all of your tips, all of your expertise. And boy, if I have an applique question, I know who to go to now.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed being here and sharing with you and our passion and love for embroidery.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is one thing we have in common for sure, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. and our love of exquisite thread. And so that is today's special. I hope that you take advantage of it. You're going to save $40 on this kit. Normally it would be almost, $120. And today it's $79.99 and free shipping on that order, which is great. So I know many of you are looking forward to visiting with Ashley Jones, and she's going to be doing Software Success on February 20th. She was out this week. She had laryngitis, poor thing. She's healing and will be better next week, but she'll go with her regular program time, which is February 20th, and she's going to work on My Fabric Designer. So if you are interested in learning how to design fabric, you might just enjoy that program. Okay, next week, I'm going to be back with Reen Wilcoxon, my good friend at Embroidery Garden. We're going to talk all about in the hoop tips and tricks, and boy, she's got great ideas to share. So I'm really looking forward to that. And that'll be at 1 o'clock also next week. And if you most certainly, we would love for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook. That tells us that you're enjoying the content that we provide, and it keeps us encouraged, right? Dawn, this is kind of a solitary sport you and I do, right? It's a lot of alone time. So
yes, it is.
Yeah, it's good to have good feedback. Well, every week we do a free on the house design, and you can get that at our website. So just go to dzgns.com and go to embroidery and then free designs. And that's where you will find the download. We would love it if you would share your projects on social media by using the hashtag of Dime Sew Along, On the House, or Exquisite Thread. We look for all three of those hashtags, and then when we find them, we create a reel so that we could share it with you. And so let's go ahead and see if we have that in the can to share with you what's happening. Oh, aren't those sweet Valentines adorable?
They are. I love them.
Yeah, I should have taken a photo. I shipped a box to my granddaughter in Norfolk last week with that Valentine, and I like to make her crib sheets that are, a print that's going to celebrate that holiday. So it was all colored with red hearts and super cute. So anyway, I should have taken a photo. I never thought about it. Oh, well. I'm always so glad, to get something personal like that out to, my family. Cause, through the years, we've always been like the cobbler's son who has no shoes, no finished quilts, no embroidered projects in our house, but it's getting better. Okay, so this week's design is all about next month's holiday, and that's St. Patrick's Day. So it's too cute to pinch. So I hope that you'll enjoy this project. It is also an applique design. So if you want to get your feet wet, this is a free design for you. And also, Dawn, that snail design is a free design on your website, right?
It is. Yes, it is.
And so Dawn's website is creativeapplique.com, creativeappliques.com. Doesn't matter if you include the S or not. I'm really proud of you for capturing both those names, Dawn. That was brilliant.
Yes, I had to make sure of that.
Yeah, it's not easy. Well, everyone, Thank you so much for joining us today. And Dawn, a big thank you to you. It was really a pleasure to get to know you and spend some time with you today.
Same here. Thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciated it and had a wonderful time.
Oh, great. Thank you. Take advantage of this week's special, and we'll see you here next week.